Welcome everyone to this edition of In the Field with UK Extension. I'm Adam Huber and I'm here today with Jason Phillips. And Jason, today in our previous, this is part 2, in our previous episode we constructed a raised bed. And so today we're going to show you all how to actually put your soil in, what you need to do, and actually plant this thing.
Exactly, yeah. So we've got our raised bed here placed on some work ground. So what we're going to do here in a moment is we're going to flag off the areas where, you know, because we've got peppers and tomatoes today. And so we're going to flag off the areas within this 4x4 raised bed that we constructed on our previous video and lay out where those different plants are going to go.
So so basically what we're going to do is we're going to put a flag where each plant would be planted.
Exactly.
So what, as far as our spacing goes, for tomatoes, we're looking at like 18 inches by 18 inches. 18
inches by 18 inches is a good rule of thumb, and this is straight out of Gardening in Small Spaces publication from the University of Kentucky. So the suggested plant spacing for tomatoes is 18 inches by 18 inches. And peppers is a little less.
Yeah, when you get into your peppers, of course, they don't bush out as much as tomatoes do, so you're looking at 12 inches by 12 inches when you're talking about
Exactly. So here I've got some soil with me, so we'll just talk real quickly. So we've got our flags for laying out the plant locations. We've got our tape measure for measuring that off. I've got this rake for leveling the soil, and I've got some raised bed soil. So this is specifically for raised beds. And I've got enough to fill this raised bed. Remember, this is a 4x4 by 12, so 4 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 12 inches tall, which is 16 cubic feet. The bags of soil that you purchase at your local hardware store is going to say how many cubic feet that they are. Now, it doesn't have to be filled to the brim, so I should have, you know, at least 3/4 of the way you would want it filled.
And it would also depend on what type of plants you're going to be planting, whether they're deep-rooted crops or shallow-rooted crops. Of course, you know, depending on what you're planting, just kind of gauge your soil depth by that.
It is a little damp out here today. You know, ideally it wouldn't be. However, you know, we never advocate working in the garden when it's wet whatsoever. But we're adding this soil on top of the existing soil, which we're making sure we don't step into this bed and compact that soil. We certainly, you know, it's a big no-no to walk around in your garden when it's wet and compact that soil, because you need that air space for water flow and those plants to breathe. So we won't be stepping in here. We're going to be doing it all from the edges, which is another good point. The size of this raised bed allows us to pick and work all the way around the edges. You really should never be standing or stepping into the middle of your raised bed.
And Jason, you mentioned water flow, and when you mentioned, you know, this is in a worked garden basically, and there's a couple of advantages of having your the space that you're putting your raised bed, the ground underneath, worked up, and that's for drainage purposes. It helps it drain out more than rather if you'd had it out here on the untilled soil.
It's going to improve your soil drainage, and it's going to allow those deeper rooted crops to go on down, you know, below the soil that we're about to add into the worked ground. Now, like we said, a lot of times people that construct raised beds, there are a lot of reasons to do it, and a lot of advantages to raised beds. But a lot of people that construct raised beds don't have tillers and garden equipment, so you can just turn that soil with a shovel. It's a good idea, you know, if that's all you have, that'll work perfectly fine. Just take that shovel and turn the soil a few times to allow those plants some extra space to grow downward. And don't ever put, you know, anything below it that's going to prevent it from draining.
And Jason, you mentioned that, you know, some advantages of a raised bed, and in our previous video we did discuss some of those advantages. But we'll just kind of brush over those real quick. So some of the advantages of a raised bed would be obviously drainage. You know, you get a good well-drained platform to, you know, to put your plants in. Another one would be weed control. You don't have to worry as much about weeds.
As long as you got weed-free soil,
right.
You know, you're not going to have weed issues.
Right. So another one would be like especially during the summertime. These air out a whole lot better than say if you were doing a conventional garden.
They do.
Right.
That's as good and bad. So you may have to water a little bit more, but it's not going to stay wet. Right. So that's a big plus. Also, the soil warms up a little quicker in a raised bed. So if it were earlier in the year, you know, we may be able to get away with planting a few things a little bit earlier.
Right.
Plus, with some of our plants that put off horizontal runners, it's going to contain those so that they don't run all over the garden. And
one really good benefit, especially for me right now with my leg that's messed up a little bit, it's ease of access to a garden. So if you've got your plants, you know, say a foot higher off the ground, then they're going to be easier to access once you try to start harvesting those crops. And even like you could even build this one up, you know, if you put legs on it, you know, 2, 3, 4, however far off the ground you want it, just for ease of access.
And some soils are not that, you know, that great. So you also have the luxury of adding whatever soil that you would like to that's a good, rich, nutrient-dense soil, which we still advocate taking a soil test, because you may need to add a little lime or you may need to add a little fertilizer to that. But there's a lot of advantages. And if you've got multiple raised beds, you know, also mulching in between those can be good to keep your weed pressure down as well.
Jason, you mentioned soil, and here, you know, like you mentioned, we bought this from the hardware store, and it's specifically for raised beds. But if you didn't want to buy, say, go to the hardware store and buy this, there are some other options that you can look into.
So this is not the cheapest, but it does have everything pre-mixed, and it specifically says raised bed. But you can buy a few different types of soil and media in order to maybe save a little money and still have the components that you need. So if you were going to go to the hardware store and buy this, what would you be looking for?
So you'd be looking to buy 1 part organic matter, which would be compost,
peat moss,
you know, that sort of thing. 1 part sand or perlite, so that's going to help with your drainage, and also and then you're going to put 2 parts of soil, actual soil,
garden soil.
And you're going to mix all that together. That's going to give you a really
top
soil. You're going to mix all that together. That's going to give you a really good, rich soil media to use in your raised bed, and then it's going to drain well, and then you should be good to go.
Probably save $1, but if you want to make it easy, you can just buy the pre-mixed raised bed soil like we have here today. So
Jason, I think we've pretty much covered everything, and I'm going to let you do all the work today.
Yeah, my buddy here, he's not as young as he used to be, so I guess I'll get down and do the dirty work today.
You know, whenever you get in your mid-20s and you play basketball, you just sometimes hurt yourself. Anyways, but yeah, we'll go ahead and get this thing, get our soil put in, and get our plant spacing marked, and I'm going to let you plant this thing.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so we got our raised bed filled with soil now, and it's evenly distributed throughout the bed. We measured and tried to get the best plant distribution we could within the guidelines. So you want to get as close as you can, and really, to err on the side of caution, you're better off to have a few less plants than too many crowded into a small area where that you get good airflow. But basically, the way that we've got it laid out, like I said today, we're going to plant peppers and tomatoes. So the way that we've got this 4x4 bed laid out is we're going to have 3 peppers and 3 tomatoes. So closest to you, we're going to have our 3 peppers. And then we're maintaining a little bit more spacing on this side, and we're going to have our 3 tomatoes here, here, and here. Basically, the blue flags represent the corners that we measured. So we'll be putting a plant in at every pink flag. And we have positioned the tomatoes on the north side of the bed because they grow taller than the peppers. So the peppers are going to be shorter. They're going to be on the south side, so they still get plenty of sunlight throughout the day. And then the tomatoes are going to be taller, and they will get plenty of sunlight. So they, you know, we wouldn't want to have it flip-flopped because the tomatoes would then shade the peppers. So that's why we've got it done the way that we do. So now we're going to go ahead and get started planting. So I'm going to dig a hole, and with the peppers I'm just breaking up the roots just a little and putting that in the ground. Your soil will settle a little, but that's one reason we got raised bed soil. It won't settle as much as just straight soil would, and it doesn't get that hard crust on it. So there we've got our pepper that's planted even with the soil line, and this soil's good and loose, so it's easy to plant in. And we'll put our tag beside of it. This is a California Wonder. Real common, just so we know what we've got here. That's a really popular bell pepper. Okay, so we've got our peppers now in the ground, and we'll move on to our tomatoes. So these tomatoes are rather large transplants, and typically I like to plant my tomatoes deep. So what we're going to do is actually, this is a Cherokee Purple. This is an heirloom tomato. It's got a dark in color, and a pretty popular heirloom variety. So we're going to break the roots up, but what we're going to do with this tomato plant is a little different than what we did with the pepper, because tomatoes can root off the stem. What we're going to do is pinch several of the lower leaves off, and we're going to plant this deep. I do this for extra root system. You know, that's why it's good to have your soil worked below your raised bed, and also durability and standability of the plant. Overall, I just think that they do better when they're planted deep. So anything below the soil line is going to put off roots. So we'll just go right here to our next marker flag. We're going to dig down a lot deeper. You can't hardly get a tomato too deep. Now this one is needing a little water. It's a little wilty, but it'll be just fine. So we've got that tomato now in the ground. It's planted good and deep. All that's going to put off a good root system and should do well. Like I say, I'd rather maintain a little better plant spacing than having them too tight, so you can get good airflow and reduce disease likelihood. As we care for these plants, you know, we will stake the tomatoes, and of course raised beds can dry out pretty quick. So we'll want to water this at least once a day. Tomatoes need about an inch of rainfall, or the equivalent of an inch of rainfall per week. So 1 inch of rainfall per week. But since raised beds do dry out quicker than traditional gardens, we'll want to water once a day. And that's the main thing that we want to do in terms of care. Also, tomatoes do benefit from additional nitrogen fertilizer when they have their first fruit reaches about golf ball size. So we'll want to add just a little bit of nitrogen fertilizer. We don't want to overdo it. About 1 tablespoon of ammonium nitrate That's 3400, or you can consult with your local extension office to get the rates. Also ID 128, Home Vegetable Gardening in Kentucky. But it is good to side dress about every 2 weeks once these tomatoes start putting on fruit. A good reminder too is don't over fertilize before they start fruit set. Then you'll end up with a lot of vine and not too much plant. All right, folks, we really appreciate you joining us today. We hope you've learned a lot from our first and second installments on constructing a raised bed as well as planting a raised bed. Hope they've served beneficial for you. I would remind you that you can watch any of our In the Field with UK Extension videos, which is a collaborative effort between the Allen County Extension Agent for Agriculture as well as myself, Simpson County Extension Agent for Agriculture. We work to put these on for you, so you can go to our websites or find us on YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and be sure to like us while you're viewing our videos. Hope this has been helpful, and remember, if you have any questions at all pertaining to container gardening or raised bed gardening or gardening in general, consult with your local extension office in Kentucky. Thank you.